Hi, Sunny.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good.
Good. Thanks so much for joining.
Of course, absolutely. How's the audio on your end? Can you hear me pretty well or? Yep,
Yep, I can hear you great.
excellent. Okay, perfect. Just gonna go, should I go ahead and share my screen now? Just getting
Yep, you can get
started.
started with that. It's enabled.
Okay, and if you could just confirm that you can see the slides, that would be great.
Yep, I can see your slides. We are good to go. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. For this session, we have with us Sunny, who is the Executive Director of Princeton Review Canada. So he's going to be chatting all about the MCAT, DAT, and LSAT. And then we have two of our admissions officers, Charlene and Alexa, going to be chatting about what's competitive for Australia. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away, Sunny.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. And so thanks everyone for joining us. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Sunny Coelho. I'm the Executive Director for the Princeton Review in Canada. So my goal today is to provide you with a very, very brief overview of the MCAT, DAT, and the LSAT. To be honest, I could talk about each of these tests for about 3 hours each, but I'm going to squeeze in a nice overview of each of them into about 15 minutes. So I apologize if it goes by quickly, but that's why I have my email address up here. Please make a note of it. If you have any questions after the session is done, please feel free to send me an email, or if you would like a copy of the slides, also feel free to send me an email and I'll be happy to share that with you. But let's dig right in. Let's start with the MCAT, which is the test I would imagine most of you are interested in. And of course, the MCAT is the medical college admission test. It is the test required for admission into medical school. And so the organization that creates the MCAT is called AAMC, they're the Association of American Medical Colleges. And you can see their website listed there, aamc.org/MCAT. So this is the website you would go to in order to register for the test. It is also the website where you would go to look for updates on the test. So for example, you may have read recently that the July, August, and September test dates, registration for those test dates won't open until May. So you'll want to keep an eye out on the AAMC website for the exact date in May when those test dates will open. Now, of course, as I mentioned, it's required for entry into most Canadian medical schools. There are a few exceptions here or there. University of Ottawa, for example, the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, neither of those schools requires a test. And then there are schools that, like McMaster University, where they only look at one score on the MCAT, for example, the MCAT CARS section. But for the most part, it's going to be required. And it is the same test whether you take it in Canada, in the United States, wherever. It's always the same MCAT. Now, the MCAT is a computer-based test, which means that it is taken on computer, but it feels very much like a sort of a paper-based test in the sense that when you are working on a section of the MCAT, you can decide which questions you want to answer in what order. And if there's a question you don't like, you can always skip it and come back to it later. So within a section, it feels a lot like taking an exam at your university, except of course that you're taking it on screen. Now notice that it is quite a long test. The total administrative day will probably take you about 7 hours and 30 minutes. The actual testing time is closer to 6 hours and 30 minutes or so, but it is quite a long day, so you should be prepared for that. Now in 2021, there are going to be 30 test dates for the MCAT. Most of them are in the summer. In fact, about half of them are in July, August, and September, the testing windows I mentioned earlier. So those are very, very popular test dates for Canadian students because, of course, it means you can wrap up your exams at the end of April and then spend a couple of months preparing for the MCAT and then take it in sort of mid to late summer. Now, in order to help with social distancing, the AAMC has introduced 2 testing windows on each of the test dates, which means that when you register for a test date, you will choose between a 7:30 a.m. or a 3 p.m. testing window. So if you're a morning person, you can go at 7:30. If you're an afternoon, you can pick a 3 p.m. testing window. The other thing I wanted to mention is that last year, due to the pandemic, the AAMC had introduced a shortened version of the MCAT that was closer to just over 5 hours. But this year, lucky you, they are returning to the full-length MCAT. So it's back to being sort of the 7-hour day. So do be prepared for the full-length test, okay? You do receive your scores after approximately 30 days, so you definitely want to keep in mind that it will be a little bit of a lag before you see your score. And then there are limitations as to how often you can take the MCAT. So you can only take it 3 times in a year, 4 times over 2 years, or my personal favorite, 7 times in a lifetime. So hopefully you'll never be in a position where you need to take it more than 7 times in your life, but they do impose a limit, probably for your own sake. Okay, so the actual MCAT looks like this in terms of the structure. So you will have 4 multiple choice sections. They're all quite long. So notice that they're either 95 minutes or 90 minutes. And one of the things to know about the MCAT is that you see all these multiple choice questions, but on the science sections, about 80% of the multiple choice questions are based on passages. So that does mean that you will be doing a lot of reading when you are working on the MCAT. Okay. Notice that there is a scoring range for each section, which is 118 to 132. And then that gets summed into a total of 472 to 528. So the 4 sections are added together and you also get a total score. So in terms of what is a good MCAT score, we have a couple of admissions officers who are going to tell you a little bit more about competitive MCAT scores in a bit, certainly for Australian schools. But in general, for Canadian schools, you're hoping to get at least a 510 and above to be competitive for a lot of Canadian schools, and then trying to get at least sort of a 127, 128 on each of the individual sections. Okay, so let's very quickly switch gears to the DAT, or the DAT. So this is, of course, for students who are interested in dentistry. So this is the dental aptitude test, and it's the Canadian Dental Association that administers this test. And this is the one test we'll look at that is actually different in Canada versus the US. So it is important to note that Canada has a paper-based version of the DAT, the US has a computer-based version, and there are other differences between the two as well. Now, normally there are only 2 opportunities to take the DAT in Canada. It's usually February and November, but due to the pandemic, the February date was canceled or postponed this year, and it has been postponed into June essentially. So the Canadian Dental Association did announce that there will be testing dates between May 29th and June the 30th, and they are going to open up registration for those testing dates on March the 16th. So if you were planning to take the DAT this year, this is probably good news. It means that you can actually take the test after your exams are done. You can use the month of May to prepare, which is, I think, a great opportunity to do that. Now, they are going to be administering the DAT in Prometric test centers this year. They usually administer them on campus at various universities, but again, due to the pandemic, they're switching up the location. You can take the DAT in a limited number of times, but if you do have more than one test score, the dental schools will only see your most recent score. All right. They will know how many times you attempted the DAT, so it will list that you took it 3 times, but they won't see all the scores. They're only going to see the most recent. So hopefully the most recent is your highest. Okay. And then it does take approximately 3 weeks for you to see your score. Okay, this is what the DAT looks like in terms of the structure. So you can see that there are essentially 4 sections, but one of them is optional, which is the manual dexterity test. And in fact, this year, the manual dexterity test isn't really an option due to the pandemic. This is what you may have heard of as the carving section. So really what you want to focus on are the 3 multiple choice sections, which is the sciences, the natural sciences, which covers biology and chemistry, the perceptual ability, and the reading comprehension. And the one thing I want you to note here is that the most difficult part of the DAT is really the time pressure. Notice that, for example, on the perceptual ability, you're answering 90 multiple choice questions in 60 minutes. Even the reading comprehension, 50 questions in 50 minutes when you're reading passages. So it's very challenging because of the pacing. So the DAT really forces you to move quickly. Now, each of the sections is scored from 1 to 30. Okay, and then you are trying to usually get at least 19 or 20 and above to be competitive for most dental schools in Canada. Okay. All right, and then again, I apologize, I know I'm moving quickly, but hopefully I'll get to some questions at the end. But the law school admission test, for those of you interested in law, is of course the LSAT. There is an organization that administers the LSAT called LSAC, and you can see their website there. Now, the LSAC has made some adjustments to the LSAT due to the pandemic. They've introduced something called LSAT Flex, which is an opportunity to take the LSAT at home. Now, the LSAT Flex does look like it is here to stay. So LSAC announced about a week and a half ago that for the next year, the next testing cycle, it will be LSAT Flex all the way through. So I've listed for you the dates when LSAT Flex, or the months at least, when LSAT Flex will be offered over the next year. So we have one coming up in June, and then you'll have an opportunity in August, and so forth. So you can see all the months listed there. Now, June is a very popular time to take the LSAT, and the registration for that actually opened a week ago Monday, so February the 22nd. So if you are interested in June, you should go ahead and register for your LSAT Flex right now and make sure you get the opportunity to take it in June. There are limits to taking the LSAT, as you can see, kind of similar to the limits on the MCAT, but slightly different. And then if you do take the LSAT more than once, most law schools will take your highest score, but just make note that there are a couple of law schools that will actually average your scores. So if you have multiple scores, they'll actually take the average. And LSAC did introduce a cool new feature this year with the LSAT Flex, which is that if you're a first-time LSAT test taker, then there is something called Score Preview that you can pay for. Of course, you have to pay for it, but basically what it does is it allows you to preview your score after you've taken the LSAT before you decide if you want to cancel or not. Normally on the LSAT, you would need to decide on a cancellation without seeing your score. So you would have to just go by how you felt. But in this case, for a first-time test taker, they're allowing you to preview your score so that you can decide with more information as to whether or not you want to cancel. Okay, and if you've never seen the LSAT before, it basically consists of 3 scored multiple choice sections that are 35 minutes each. One is called games, one is called reading comprehension, one is called arguments. So I encourage you to check out a free LSAT practice test to familiarize yourself with the different sections. But please note that once the August test date rolls around, LSAC will be introducing something called an experimental section. This is a section that will look exactly like one of the other 3 sections, but you won't know that it's the experimental. So the experimental doesn't count towards your score, but of course it's not labeled as such. So you do need to try your best on all of the sections. This is LSAC's way of trying out new questions, and unfortunately they use you as the guinea pigs. So also in August, they're going to be introducing a short break between sections 2 and 3 since they're increasing the length. So what that means for you is that the June test date is going to be shorter than the August test date. It's only going to be the 3 scored sections. So there's an advantage to taking the LSAT in June. Okay. But then moving forward after August, it will always have the 4 sections. Then there also is an essay that you take, but now you don't take it on the day of the LSAT. Basically, you will have access to this essay anytime up to a year after you've taken your LSAT for you to take the essay. It is not graded, but the only trick is that you do need to complete the essay before you can see your LSAT score. Okay. And then the LSAT has a scoring range of 120 to 180. So most students are aiming for a 160 and above to feel competitive for most Canadian law schools. Okay, so I'll just wrap up by talking about a few free options to sort of get you going in terms of your preparation. So for the MCAT, we have a couple of free events that we think you should participate in if you have some time. So tomorrow night, we're having a medical school symposium where we're actually going to talk about applying to Canadian medical schools, and our friends at Austrek will actually be presenting there as well. We're going to also provide an overview of an MCAT passage, and we're going to have some medical school students discussing their experiences in med school. So the URL is there if you'd like to register. We're also having a practice mock MCAT on Saturday, so definitely sign up for that if you just want to get a full score report, see how you would do on the MCAT, stress-free, just go in and take a practice, okay? And then similarly, we have the exact same events, but for dental school and the DAT happening on March 25th and March 27th. So you can check those out at the URL listed there. We actually just had those events for the LSAT, a law school symposium and a free practice LSAT last month, but we were always adding more events. So check out the URL there for free law-related events. And then in terms of other free resources, we have an MCAT free prep trial, which is basically a free 2 weeks a preview of our biology lessons in our MCAT course. So if you just want to check out what the MCAT course looks like, you can go to the free trial, sign up for 2 free weeks, and you can do all the drills, preview all the lessons. And then we also have an MCAT flashcards app to help you memorize a lot of the things that are most challenging about the MCAT. Okay. And then if you're interested in any programs, we do have MCAT programs. I won't go through all the details, but I'll just mention that we do have an MCAT Ultimate program that's 123 hours. We run this online and hopefully soon in person as well. And you can see we provide you with all the tools you would need. A team of instructors, 16 full-length tests, course books delivered as soon as you register. And then we also have an additional guarantee, which is that we guarantee that you will receive either a 5-10 on the MCAT or that you will improve at least 10 points. So if you'd like to take advantage of that guarantee, you can. You can see there down at the bottom, the 5-10 guarantee. If you don't achieve one of those two things, we'll provide you with a refund on the program. So we're putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to our MCAT course, okay? DAT course, similarly, we have something called the Fundamentals program that's 30 hours. We run this course throughout the year leading up to different test dates, and we will be introducing some schedules in May now that we know that there will be test dates in June. So keep an eye out on our website. By next week, you'll see a couple of new schedules that take place in May that prepare you for that Canadian DAT in June. And then, of course, we have a couple of LSAT programs as well, the 165 course and the fundamentals. Details are listed here. We run these throughout the year leading up to each of the different LSAT test dates. And of course, we will have schedules that lead up to that very popular June test date as well. So definitely check out our website for more of the details, but you can see some of them listed here. Okay. And so I just wanted to once again pop up my contact information. Please make note of my email address so that if you do have questions about the tests or the programs, feel free to contact me directly. And I'll pass it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Lots of awesome information there, Sunny. And I will pass it over to Alexa to chat all about those scores for Australia. Alexa, just pop off mute.
I think you'll need to let me share my screen because it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sunny, you're actually still the host, so if you wouldn't mind passing that over to Alexa.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that. That's my bad. Okay, I will definitely make her the host for sure. Just 1 second here.
No problem.
Okay, I think you should be good to go.
Perfect. Perfect. Can everyone see?
Yeah, I think it's good. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Maybe I'll just start it off once it's like open.
Perfect.
Okay, so just quickly talking about the LSAT. Most of the schools don't require them. The only one that has in the past is the University of Melbourne for like the law school. And they haven't confirmed for 2022 yet. So if you want to know if it's going to be necessary for Melbourne, just stay in touch. Email law at Austrec, and you can speak to Kaylee, and then she can let you know when Melbourne does confirm for this intake, this coming intake. Okay, so a couple admissions changes that we're thinking are going to happen because of COVID. So last year, what we saw was a lot of students who wanted to go to Australia for the 2021 intake or January 2021 didn't complete their apps, and instead they were moved to 2022, and some schools weren't starting online. So all of those apps also got moved to this intake. So what we suspect is going to happen this year is there's going to be more applications, less amount of seats for some of the students who deferred, which naturally means more competition. So MCAT scores, DAT scores, they're probably going to need to be higher to be competitive. And also your your cumulative GPA will also likely need to be higher to be competitive for the 2022 intake. This is just what we're thinking at Austrec. We're not, we don't know for sure, but we're seeing a lot more apps come in this year. So that's probably what's going to end up happening. Okay, so this is just to give you a good idea of what to expect for the MCAT. These are based on January 2020 the 2020 intake. I didn't use last year's because COVID kind of skewed the numbers, and some of the offers were given before the MCATs were available because they all got pushed. Anyway, so this is for the January 2022 intake, just to give you an idea of the average MCAT that we saw for each university, the maximum amount, the minimum amount of students who got offers at each of these universities. And then in the first column here, you'll see the minimum to apply. So something that's good to note is that, so for Deakin, 509 was the average. That does not mean that you can't get an offer if you have less than 509. That's just where we saw the averages landing. I saw somebody ask a question earlier that said, if you have more than one MCAT, can you use, which score do they use? As long as it's in the validity period, so most of our schools are 3 years from the start of the program, you can choose which score they're going to use. So if you wrote the MCAT last year and this year and you like last year's score better, you can still choose to use that one when your app is submitted. So if something else also to note, you probably heard about this if you went to the medicine presentation earlier tonight, is that it's also it's not just your MCAT that will determine if you can get an offer. It's also based on your interview and GPA. And each school weights them differently. So if you don't know if you're competitive or even if you're eligible, shoot an email to medicine@austrec.com, and Amanda will be happy to look over your GPA, your MCAT, and let you know where you lie on the competitive scale for applying.
Okay, awesome. I will talk a little bit about competitive DAT scores. So we only have 3 universities that require the DAT to be able to apply. So that would be Melbourne, Sydney, and University of Western Australia. So generally speaking, based on the past 2 years for Melbourne and Sydney, competitive would be a score of about 20 to 21. For UWA, it was a bit higher than that. So it was around like a 22 to 24 is what was competitive. And the important thing to note as well is that each university does calculate your DAT average a little bit differently. So for University of Western Australia, they don't include your PAT scores. So when they calculate your DAT average, it's just your reading comprehension, biology, and chemistry scores, not the PAT. So the reason they do that is because UWA, as part of their interview process, has a spatial awareness test, and it's very similar to the PAT section on the DAT. So because of that, they just don't include it. So that could be a good option for you if, let's say, you took the DAT and you had good scores and everything except for the PAT section. UWA could be a good option. So for Sydney, they take the way they calculate your DAT average is from your reading comprehension, biology, chemistry, and your PAT score. And then for Melbourne, they just take the average from every single section on the DAT. So yeah, it's just something to keep in mind because your score could be slightly different depending on which university that you're applying to.
Great, thank you so much. Lots of very valuable information from Sunny, Charlotte, and Alexis. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. If you do have any questions that come up later, you can always email. Sunny's information, email contact information was posted in the chat as well. And you can also feel free to email medicine@austrec.com or dentistry@austrec.com at any point to ask any questions about anything that you might have you need to know about. So if there aren't any questions, we will wrap it up. There is one more session left in our virtual fair from the University of Melbourne happening at 8:20. That's probably already just 3 minutes in, but if you do have more questions as well, the fair is going to be open for another 40 minutes until 9 p.m. So feel free to head back to Career Echo, chat with our university partners, and chat with our Austrec team. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much.